You're absolutely correct.
Good evening. Welcome to the Housing, Health, and Public Safety Committee. For those of us just joining us, Mr. Braden and I were just arguing about our ages. Have a really exciting meeting this evening. We have some Xavier student and a capstone project that they're going to present to us, and we'll go ahead and turn it over to them. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. As a part of...
Can you speak into the mic? Sorry. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. As a part of our project management course here at Xavier University, we've had the privilege to work with various companies and nonprofits over the course of the semester here. Our group was able to work with a nonprofit called Norwood Together with our great sponsor, Ron Mosby. Just a little introduction. My name is Carl Warsh. I'm a junior management major from Cleveland, Ohio.
My name is Nanya Price, and I'm a management major from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm in my final year.
And then my name is Alex Sexton. I'm also a project or a management major, and I'm from Chicago.
Another management major here. My name is Zach Ramsey, and this is also my final year as well.
My name is Matthew Godby. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, and I am a junior, and I'm also a management and marketing major.
Then without further ado, I think we can get started. So as I mentioned before, we're working with Norwood Together this semester, and that is all based around affordable housing in the city of Norwood and trying to find affordable housing for the residents here. So part of our project was coming up with these key deliverables. We highlighted it as our mission for this case. So first step, to be able to find affordable housing, you have to know what affordable housing is. So that starts with defining what affordable housing is. Followed by that, there are some key aspects of affordable housing that factor into finding these housing complexes for families, whether that is low-income housing tax credits, other housing preservations for households that we'll get into a little bit later. Another key aspect is finding the area median income for the city of Norwood. Why that's important? Affordability is different for each person based off of their income, also their age. I know Zach and Alex will talk a little bit about that more later, but that's a key aspect to keep in mind. And finally, finding the locations where that housing can be built or redeveloped from the ground up or from existing locations here in Norwood. So just to start, we want to give a nice rule of thumb definition of what we believe affordable housing is. Affordable housing is housing in which the household renters or occupants are paying no more than 30% of their gross income for the gross housing costs, and that includes anything from utilities to housing bills across that landscape. Just getting a little bit more into the affordable housing aspect, affordable housing is to the extent in which the people in the housing unit is affordable for that housing unit itself. So that doesn't include the houses around them, it's just their unit for that household or family. Obviously, the affordable housing factors in the 30%, so that leaves 70% left over. So you might ask what that's factored in. That factors in things such as transportation, clothing, food, anything else that factors into basic care and necessities for families. And when you say it's affordable, it means the units, like I mentioned before. And what we were touching on here, we were touching on the lower to medium income families here in Norwood. That's what we wanted to focus on, and we will talk a little bit more about that later. Another important aspect that I looked into was that it needs to be affordable for the renters and the families as well. But if you're building from the ground up, it needs to be affordable for the builders and developers as well, because it's an affordable housing project, not just a house. So that's an important aspect. And Matthew will talk a little bit more about the low-income housing tax credits later on, but there are other programs and resources to conserve and preserve these low housing projects, whether that's a Affordable Housing Trust Fund, investment partnerships, or low housing tax credits, like Matthew will get into a little bit later. And without further ado, we are going to jump into a few of the locations that we've discovered.
Okay, so when we began the search for locations, it was a little bit overwhelming just because there's so many listings on different websites like Redfin and Zillow. And so as a team, we created a location criteria. First one works as an umbrella term for the rest of our criteria list, and that's that the locations must be within a community. So we didn't want the affordable housing to be in an isolated area where the residents couldn't mix in with Norwood. And the goal was to keep everyone together. So that is something that we looked more into when we were selecting our locations. And then we also considered that some of these people that are looking for affordable housing might be families with younger kids or people going to college. So we wanted the locations to be near local schooling. So there's Clark, Walnut, Xavier, UC. It's all within a 15-minute drive. With that being said, if you're someone that's looking for affordable housing, you might not have a car. So we wanted to account for that as well. And so having easy access to not only grocery stores, but transportations was also a very important part of our location criteria. And then lastly, just being within the 45212 zip code. So this is our first location. This is 5501 Glendale Lane. And something that struck me right off the bat is it looks pleasing from the outside. Oftentimes you're driving through areas where there's Section 8 housing, for example, the housing kind of looks a little bit beat up, and no one deserves to live like that. So we wanted to make sure that it looked well on the outside, but also another benefit of this building is that it houses 73 units, and in each of those units there's anywhere from 1 to 2 bedrooms. So that was the main thing with that one. And then for location 2, sorry about that, this one's a lot smaller, and we thought that this would be great for people that are maybe single or just living alone. This is 5739 Montgomery Road. There's 6 units in this building, and again, it's very well kept on the outside, and it just feels more homey, I suppose. And all of these locations do meet that location criteria. And then moving on to the final one, ideally, we thought it would be best to have a larger location so that more people could have access to affordable homing, and that was 4330 Smith Road. We weren't able to confirm the exact number of units, but I do believe it's over 73. And each of these are 1-bedroom units, and so it would be more ideal for people that don't have families, but the people that do have families, they would be a good fit for the first location. So those are our locations that we have.
All right. I'm going to talk more about the area median income of Norwood. The AMI is the midpoint of the region's income distribution. Half of the families in the region earn more than the median, and the other half earn less than the median. The average household income is $66,673, and that is actually an increase of 2.8% from year-to-year change. Also, median household income is $48,703. That is also an increase of 6.9% from year-to-year change. But people below the poverty level is 3,986, and this is also a decrease of 5.8% from year-to-year change. And then people above the poverty level is 14,609. This is also a decrease of 5.8% year-to-year change. And just put that in perspective, the most recent data that I could gather from the U.S. Census Bureau, 18,790 people do live in Norwood. So it is good seeing that we do have over 14,500 people above the poverty level. And yeah, and then Zach is going to talk more about the median income per age.
Yeah, so as Carl talked about earlier, affordability is kind of different for everyone, right? So here's kind of a breakdown of the median income per age in Norwood. So under 25, sitting right at $38,500, and you can kind of infer that those are people kind of just getting started in entry-level careers, and some of those still maybe living under same roof as their parents, making less money. And then in the middle two categories, you could kind of see further advancing in your career, making a little bit more money, acquiring new things, and that could taper off if people have families, children, school, as we mentioned. And then for the over 65, spending will tend to decrease, and some in that category, I'm sure, are living on Social Security, so we have to factor that in. So why should we consider age? We need to consider age because, as I said, affordability looks different for everybody, and we should really look at locations that consider those factors. For people with kids that want a safer location, closer to schools and kind of more walking distance areas to amenities and daycares as well.
So for tax and credits, excuse me, so there are two different kinds of tax and credits. There's a 4 and a 9% tax and credits. The 4% is non-competitive versus the 9, which is competitive. And there's a whole lot of paperwork that has to go in with that. I talked to David Thomas with the Thompson from Norwood together about it, and he walked me through it over our break. So we decided to go with the 4% tax and credits, which are not, there's no allocation for the credits needed. There's no carryover, and there's a little bit more of a deadline to be applied for it. It is applied April 15th, and the overall deadline extension is October 15th. As far as why we chose this as a group, they're used when a project is financed by tax-exempt bonds, and there's usually a 10-year rule when it applies. And we always have to take into consideration that every year the criteria changes, and normally the 4% kind of varies between 2 and 5%, and we just feel like the lower number is better for the people that we're trying to get these affordable homes for, because with the 9%, there is about 100 to 150 spots, and since there is that 14,609 people that are residents in Norwood, we just feel like that those people will not have as fair chance as they should get to be able to get the 9%. So we're just going to stick with the safe bet and tell them to go for the 4%. The 4% subsidized loans, financing is easier to get, and they're more likely to get bonds for it. Excuse me, and yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I'm not an expert about this stuff. It was really hard to figure it out. So, and yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have anything else to add? Okay, from there, I think we can open it up to any questions that the board may have. Ron, would you like to add anything else before any of the questions from the board?
Yes, first of all, thank you to the students and thank you to Xavier University. I would say that part of the objective, just very quickly, we would be hoping at Norwood Together that the definition and the policy that they are recommending would be able to be adopted by the city, which would then kind of put us in, because I would like to take it to the board of Norwood Together to have them adopted as well, and then that way that policy could be used when identifying potential affordable housing areas where housing could be developed. So that's it.
I think I do want a hard copy. You said policy, and I guess I didn't hear a policy statement.
So that policy statement that Ron is speaking about, that is built into the overall definition and what is included in what affordable housing is, and that touches base on the 30% rule of thumb that we came up with that factors into the gross income for what affordable housing is. Depending on where you go, who you ask, affordable housing can be different. So that was part of our task, is to come up with an affordable housing definition that suited what we were looking for in this case. That can change, obviously, but that is what we were able to construct as a result. And as a result, working with Ron and the other group members to find those locations, it is, at least for finding plots of land to build from the ground up, is slightly more difficult, as some of the pieces of land would only suit maybe 1 to 2 families at most. within the 45212 zip code, correct? So that's why we were trying to look at more already developed pieces of land or housing so that we could factor into these medium to low income families and hopefully get them in there and have affordable housing for them based off of that 30% of their gross income.
Based on the properties that you looked at, what were those rentals, rent amounts? And did they fall under the 30% based on the median income?
Yes, I believe that the average was between, the lowest was 900, the highest was 1,200.
Did she say 9 to 12?
900 to 1,200. My math isn't fast, but
And the
that's
median
not
is 48.
30, what's 30% of, what was it? One of them was, let's start with 63%. That's the highest average. What would that rent be?
I had to,
Tell me.
I'll take a paper.
60. That's 5,300.
So were you, when you were looking at like the family ones, you were assuming there'd be more than one adult earning? Is that
Yes.
what I'm guessing? Okay.
Partially, but also, how do I put this into words? Something that we'd have to consider is that there are current residents in the housing, and so we'd have to make sure there's room for the new residents that are looking for the affordable housing. We were more so looking at overtaking a building, just because there weren't too many properties that were for sale, and the ones that we did find that were in the specific 45212 zip code were currently pending. When we first started the project, they were available, but yeah, they got marked pending, so,
So the actual buildings were for sale?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And those
All three
three?
of them?
Not these specific buildings, but the buildings that we were able to find, that kind of fit the criteria a little bit better. They either were not in the 45212 zip code specifically, or they were pending sale.
Where's Glendale Lane?
I think it might be Pleasant Ridge. I believe it's Pleasant Ridge. I think that's right
So this is
outside.
discussion planning, have you I mean, this is a study and we're just, bringing this to fruition. Have you talked to these owners, or is these are just the buildings that you guys are saying that will fit the profile for some sort of grant that will allow that to happen?
Yes.
So you haven't spoke to the owners of these properties. These are just scanned.
IDs.
We're gonna hit.
Ideas.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so a large portion of that is we're trying to get as many families into affordable housing as much as we can. Like Nonye had described, the first location in the PowerPoint, I think it had 73 units in it, and that was 1 to 2 bedrooms each. So our goal is just trying to find locations to get families in. With the housing market and everything else, with plots of land, already developed buildings, it's fairly difficult. So we're just trying to find and construct ideas where possibilities for this affordable housing could be implemented into. So that was our inspiration in terms of finding those buildings, in terms of the units and the families that could be put into there for the affordable housing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the work. It's really interesting.
I'm just looking for the over 65. That is a monthly income of about $2,800 a month, and that would be $850, which would be rent, water, heat. There's probably 3 properties that meet that.
It'd be time.
Yeah.
And in terms of the utilities, I was also doing a little bit of research on that as well. Obviously, as we're all college students, we've had to deal with apartments or off-campus living, and renters and landlords all factor in utilities differently. So that would be different from each facility as well. Water's included, electric's included, heat's included, gas is included, even Wi-Fi now is included in utility bills, I guess. So that would also be factored into each individual house and how that's broken down. So we can't speak exactly on what that 30% factors in, because I know I mentioned earlier 30% includes utilities, but that also factors into the contract and the lease that they would have to sign in order to live in those specific units as well.
I think I'm kind of going back to Mr. Mosby's ask about the city wanting to do something with this. And the only thing that I have is the 30% gross income. Is that what your vision is?
Yes, I'm sorry. I
Sorry.
apologize. So yes, that would be number one. I think what would be important would be for us to have a common definition of what that means. And I can explain this just really briefly. Affordable housing, as they had mentioned, is a housing that any family would be able to afford to live in based on their income. I have noticed in discussions about affordable housing, there's confusion. And part of that confusion is with Section 8 housing. And so Section 8, when we talk about that, generally has, it draws some kind of a negative response from people. But Section 8 housing is actually, it's really more subsidy. In other words, a person can move into a house that maybe they would normally not be able to afford, but because of, money that would be given to them for the house, they would be able to stay in that house. Affordable housing is different. It would be housing that they could afford to live in based on what their income is. So as their income increases, right, then the amount of money that they would be able to spend on housing would also increase, as opposed to someone just giving them money for the housing. So I believe that making that distinction is very important, especially when we're talking about what we would like to do with affordable housing. I love the fact that the students actually showed, because with affordable housing, people can and should be able to live in this community, amongst people with varying levels of income. As you all saw already, you see the median income it does vary according to age, but Norwood has I believe it's a very nice median income overall for the residents of the city. And so this affordable housing is not something where we're talking about just simply taking as they were saying before, taking a plot of land and just saying, okay, this is going to be quote unquote designated as affordable housing. It should be interspersed, throughout the city. So that way people can live in various parts of the city in a unit that they would be able to afford. I could give an example of one project that is going on right now, actually in Pleasant Ridge, and it's on Montgomery Road, and you're familiar with it, Ms. Hoover, right? So in there, it's a perfect example, because you actually have about 80% of the units that are being built are really more market rate, but then you have approximately 20% that are affordable. And the reason that they can be mixed in with that is because of what was talked about before, things like the housing tax credits, other grants that also may be available in order to do renovation and development projects like that, if that helps.
So for clarity, you just wanted to, because I agree, affordable
Okay.
housing is the umbrella. Underneath affordable housing are things like Section 8 or subsidized housing. But, so you're just suggesting that there be a understanding that affordability is that 30% umbrella under which other options exist.
Yes, and I also believe that, because this is one of the things that Norwood together at some point would like to get into, which is to be able to help develop such kind of projects. But by doing that, we have a common understanding of what the terms are that we're using,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just because we're talking about Pleasant Ridge, the development of Pleasant Ridge.
Yes.
And you say some of them would be, how does that, explain to me, how does that work when you have, in the same project, you're saying you have, the goal is to make a home, a renovation, and to, I know someone who is putting money into that is to get your return as high as you can get it. And if someone's paying, let's say, I don't know, this $1,300 for this apartment, and you're saying the other apartment here is going to fall under affordable housing. Is that what we're saying in Pleasant Ridge? So how does that work? This family gets this rate. Is it some sort of tax break and from the government that subsidizes that to the homeowner, or how does that work? And who? I'm just trying to figure out. In the same project, this person's paying 13, but yet we're going to subsidize their rent and bring them down to say 7 or whatever. So, and then they're basically going to get the same amount, but they're going to get a credit of 4% or whatever it is. I'm trying to figure that out and exactly how that works.
One of the ways that has to happen is it has to happen on a larger scale. You wouldn't be able to do it on a smaller scale.
Okay.
So in this case, there are, I believe, 80 some units that are being developed. And so in that case, 20% is about 16. All right, so the housing, for example, the housing tax credits is one part of it. There also may be grants that would be available, but that is, your question is a great question, but that is how they put the funding together in order to do the project. And quite frankly, there are developers that kind of specialize in this. Who spoke with Mr. Thompson, right? Yeah. So he's part of the model group. He's a vice president of affordable housing in the model group. So they actually have to look at projects like that to determine, how much it would cost them. And as you pointed out, that they would need to be able to get a particular return on the investment. And so what helps that are the subsidies that tend to come in. And I think you all explained that. So there's the affordable on the one side, on the tenant side, or owner side, but then there's also the affordability on the developer side. So it's actually kind of a two-tiered type of project.
And I think process-wise, so if you're getting affordable housing, you have to report your income. And so like they stated earlier, if their income goes up, their rent goes up.
Okay.
I lived in one of those units in St. Louis where it was just some units you paid at cost pending your income, and other units, if your income was low, you paid a certain percentage lower. And it was pretty successful. But yeah, you have to prove income, so it's like taxes. So then they know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And absolutely. It's a tough sell, because I've said this before, for 30 years now, I'm a contractor. I do kitchens and bathrooms, and I work on houses every day. It's a tough sell in Norwood. For literally my entire career, I've been taking these homes and bringing them to, basically, hopefully worth $1 million. And, we want to get all kinds of money for them. And then on the other hand, we want to, and there are places to live in Norwood that aren't like that. So it's just a tough sell in Norwood, but that's not taken away from any of the work here. It's great. It's great work. Yeah.
I do like how you guys kind of have with those houses, for the units, the properties. Do you kind of have a breakdown of like what you're looking for? Like we need X amount of units in this property, we want X amount of square footage, anything like that, where if we want to build, be like, oh hey, this property's going up, it's got kind of the bullet points we would look for affordable housing.
Yeah, so there is a minimum of 800 square feet in all of those units, and that was something I thought was important because I've lived in a dorm before, and if you have like kids or something, you definitely don't want to share 800 square feet. So I think the maximum was 1,500, and I thought that was a sweet spot to set this up. So, yeah.
What about number of units? I think, was that your question?
That too, I mean, if you just, anything where there's that bullet point of like, oh hey, this property's up, it would be a good opportunity.
Yeah, so I wasn't 100% sure on, how many people we would want to make an impact on, but I thought the more the merrier. And so the first and the third unit were the largest units that I could find, and then I put the second one in as just the average buildings that were available, for those like 6-unit or 4-unit duplexes.
And I just want to make one other point. To your point with how this factors into contractors and developers, this also has to factor in, the whole policy itself has to factor into all the other important stakeholders involved. Obviously, it's the families and the houses, but also the neighbors of these new developments, developers, contractors, grocery stores, the whole community is going to be affected by this policy. So it's not just the renting families that would be living in this. So you also have to factor in the surrounding communities, other neighbors, families that would also be factored in this policy, and building up the community as well. The whole city of Norwood, I guess, could serve as an important stakeholder here, bringing in more families, hopefully, to build up the city of Norwood itself. So that's an important factor to bring in too.
Thank you.
Carl he actually said what I was going to say, but I would also want to take in consideration there are a lot of students in Norwood, and I would be considered one of these people that would be a low-income person who would need an apartment for such, and I think that getting students on board with this could also be a factor, because not all students have parents that are paying for their stuff. So this could be marketed to students to also fill some of these locations, just so we can fill the 80-something locations for our residencies with low-income housing. And I think we just don't need to focus on the families. We can focus on the students or the single parents or something on the lines of that.
This is just a random question. Do you have any idea what the rent is at the senior building, Carpenter Flats?
Oh, I
Does
don't
anyone
know.
Okay. I believe that is marketed as affordable housing, but I actually don't think I've ever seen what the rent is. Another thing that I just wanted to mention to you, Mr. Braden, a year or so ago, Mrs. Winterbauer and I went to a program on affordable housing from a developer standpoint, and they have these sort of mind-numbing graphs where they look at how many units, how much are they going to rent the unit for the profit, and they just sort of keep plugging things in to try to see if if the math is going to work. And it's a very complicated formula. And some developments do things where the market rate has like the granite countertops, whereas the affordable units might not have the higher end finishings. So sometimes they do things like that. Sometimes the market rate actually subsidizes the subsidized apartments. So there's a lot of different ways that they can make it work. But ultimately it is this crazy,
All the factors.
yeah, it's a spreadsheet I've never.
That's a good point. One of my mottos is when I'm doing my renovations, and I do them every day for the past 30 years, is especially when I buy a home that I'm going to rent, is in my mind, I always say that renters deserve nice things too. Right. And I make sure that when I'm doing a home for a renter that it's at least appears high end, because I really believe that renters deserve, I mean, that's just a motto that I have when I'm, as I'm going through my, daily, my career and stuff. So, I really believe that renters are important and they deserve nice things. So that saying came to mind when you were talking about the different types of units. So anyway.
Yeah, just to touch off of that, I did the same thing when I was looking for the location. So the very first one has newly renovated-ish apartment buildings, and then the second one has built-in laundry. And so I thought these are things that I would want to have, and just because I can't afford a nicer thing doesn't mean I can't have it at the same time. So
Of course.
I took account for that as well.
And it makes residents want to stay, for sure, because you want your residents to stay for a long time because it gives your reputation up very well. And giving Norwood Together that credibility can really launch into something better than, it could get better than it is. Even not saying it isn't great, but it has room to expand beyond Norwood and get these other communities into it, because I definitely know other communities are trying to get something like this on the radar, and they just can't because it's just a hard thing to do.
Anybody have any other questions
It was a
or?
great presentation. Good job, guys. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Tanya is one of my top 10 all-time favorite female names, just so you know. Thought I'd say that, so. I've been married to a Tanya for
Right.
32 years.
Got a
so-
reason for it. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
If you want to stay, we're going to be chatting about chickens.
Great to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nice to meet you.
Oh, yeah, thanks for coming.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
So are you renting to people around the city?
Absolutely.
My parents did the exact same thing.
Yeah, I own 5, and
Okay.
3 of them are multifamily units.
Yeah.
And I have a really nice apartment right now.
All right, we're going to
Really nice
shift
client.
focus
My
and
parents have
chat
30
about
around here, and they're 30. They're
chickens.
killing it. Grandpa and mom have 30 between the two of them, and
Dude,
they love it.
It's just like
So-
goals.
yeah.
Goals right there, man.
Yep. So I really appreciate what you're doing because I know we got.
Oh, sure. I guess so. We're still on camera, just so you know. Yep.
Maybe like right.
You want to? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you so much. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, get the seal of Norwood behind them.
When ready, count of 3. 1, 2, 1 second. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Our future.
That's a good looking group right there.
Appreciated it.
Okay, so chickens, just to refresh, we had been contacted by some residents interested in increasing from 7 to 10 chickens, maintaining 0 rooster. Is this ringing a bell? And one of the other issues was the permitting. So currently, we have, and I gave a whole lot of stuff, currently we have a $25 a year permitting fee for chickens. Once you've gotten the permit. And what some residents were saying was that was getting really expensive. If you do this for 10 years, it's $250 and, and so they were requesting that it be a one-time permit fee that lasts forever. So I pulled up some others. There are a lot. This was not exhaustive. But some other places do a 1 year, some do like a 2 year, and then you have to resubmit. So basically, I just want us to begin a conversation about what you think about the permitting process. I did reach out to the building department and the Board of Health. The one main issue is that we just want to be sure that whatever we do, that the health department has the capacity to go back and check on it if there are any issues. Now, that should fall under all the other things that we already have in place, like feces or, any kind of nuisance. But we want to be sure that we are very transparent that the Board of Health can inspect at their discretion. And Mr. Skelly is here. We chatted briefly the other day. He worked on one of these. Wait, which one did he do? The one that starts Article 3. That's yours, right, sir? Yes. So this is one that Mr. Skelly did for a different municipality. But he knows a lot about chickens. We also have one from Franklin County, one from Lebanon, and which one is this? I don't remember what this one was. These all seemed most similar to the Norwood one. And just kind of wanted to touch base and see what people's initial thoughts were.
One more time, because
Sure.
I got half of that, most
got
of it
it.
I got. Other communities and what they charge, did you say that?
I can tell you, I've got it written down here. Columbus, they have a fee of $150 for 4 years. Hamilton is a one-time fee of $114.40 to $165, depending on the number of chickens, I guess. So those were the ones for the one time. Here, Lebanon's is, I'll find that on here. And I'm not sure how they came up with their numbers. I can tell you the city of Norwood, it's $25 a year for the permit. It takes Mr. Shelby about an hour to do the initial inspection. So I actually sort of feel like us charging people $25 a year, we lose money because that's an hour. He's got to drive there, do the inspection, and drive back. And we're getting $25 for that bit of his time. So I think if we did a higher fee, it would be more financially, it would be a better use of his time, would be my guess. I think that's the better way
A
of putting
higher,
it.
like, fee charged less frequently,
Thank you.
because it's 25 a year now.
So maybe like, I'm just gonna throw $150 out there. Sign up, get your chickens, go out, do a assessment. And say, hey, that's your one-time fee. And I would want to know the health department, building department's info, and Mr. Skelly, what you think. So if there is a violation or a complaint, there's like kind of a period of, hey, we're gonna be back every 6 months, you know, or just make sure, like, what would that look like? I mean, I see on here kind of, any violation, you have a fine, and then kind of a time lock there. If the issue is not resolved. What are your?
So right now, it's 25 a year, it's 25 for a year?
Yeah.
Correct.
Every year.
And the residents who came to talk on it, they said they've spent so much money with that $25 a year. They're like, we'll have chickens our whole, since we're here. So I think one of them spent over $300 since they've had chickens on just that fee alone. And then balancing the time that Mr. Mr. Shelby goes there yearly is just kind of like, they're all taking
Has
care of
anybody,
the chickens.
has anybody got any experience with chickens? Like, how
Yeah.
much does it take, is it a bunch of money, like when you're feeding them?
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
the
it's
eggs
not-
that they're producing?
It costs a lot
I'm
of money.
sure it's costing you money to get a couple eggs, right? Like,
Well, and that was their.
it's not
point.
like you're
It's
getting cheap eggs, you're paying pretty expensive price for these eggs.
Well, their
So-
point was they're doing, like, if you're gonna have chickens, you're gonna spend money and you're gonna spend time to make sure your chickens are safe. So you get the, like, you're
I get the
invested.
appeal.
Yeah, but they're invested in it, so
Yeah.
they're like,
So what, I mean.
In the end, they're paying more money doing just $25 annually as
Yeah.
opposed to just paying the $150.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
mean, it
why.
doesn't matter to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be willing to hear from the administration, but I don't care if they don't, I mean, I guess we have to charge to go out for an
The
inspection.
initial inspection
Doesn't matter to me
is-
if they have chickens. I don't care if they
Basically for-
charge them or not, you know?
Good
I didn't bring my
evening.
chicken outfit, so
You got chickens, man?
as a kid, but it was like, to me, I think you guys touched upon the solution. And the solution is to approach it like a business model decision. So I think you need to find out how many permits are we talking about in the city? So right now, how many operators, like say a chicken in their backyard, how many people do we have? The second part, you already brought out a major qualification in terms of how long does it take Jim to to get out there, make the inspection, and does he do it on an annual basis? And then I think the third part of the report you need is, do we have, I would say, if you are inspecting every single year, do you have repeat offenders, that there's always something wrong, or that they have to come out 6 months and they need more care, which is time. Time is money. So I think if you approach it as a business model, how many permits we have altogether, how do we distribute? So $25 per permit per year sounds like, to me, we're subsidizing this program, because when you factor Jim's salary, healthcare, all the things, paying for the vehicle, gasoline, insurance, everything, it's probably, that time all in is twice that price. So you really need to kind of approach it from a mathematical standpoint. How many operations we have and distribute the cost. So if there's a way to incentivize good behavior, or just, like I say, cover your costs. I use the approach sometimes in dealing with things, full cost recovery. The city should not be losing money or subsidizing people that are doing good behavior, or people that are constantly having issues with their neighbors. So I think if you look at that and ask for the additional information from the health department, it should be pretty clear as to where the appropriate fee should be, you know.
Yeah.
But
I do not know the number of permits that we have. I was told that there has not been an issue. There have not been complaints about people housing chickens.
yeah, like for me, anecdotally, I don't think there's probably more than maybe a dozen in the city.
That would be my guess.
Yeah. So if you kind of use that and create your own scenario, you can kind of probably figure out, you know, like before you get a bit tonight, roughly where that would be. But you know, to do an annual inspection, you know, start to finish, yeah, probably an hour, and then use that. And you can probably, you know, ask HR, what's the all-in cost for that particular person? And again, here's another question: could it be done by someone else, more cost-effective, or it could be done, you know, it's just, or do you need to have an annual inspection if the person has, there's no offenses, you know, in terms of odor or whatever?
My understanding from last time was that the first inspection is very labor intensive, right? And then after that, as long as Mr. Shelby doesn't see any obvious violations. Because at that point, the chickens are there, and if something were going wrong.
Yeah.
So I think the follow-up ones are probably less, they take up less time. Well, that was my understanding. I could be
Yeah.
wrong. We might need to bring one of our chicken people back. Or
I
Mr.
can ask-
Shelby.
I can
would
ask
probably
Mr. Shelby. I
be-
think he's
yeah.
still on vacation.
Yeah, but I think, like,
He might
to
be
me,
back.
it's something where at least 10 years ago, it was gaining popularity. It's kind of, I don't know, there's people just, you know, having other issues, but it is a popular thing, and sometimes people, neighbors, if as long as you don't have roosters, the amount, I think I spoke to someone, sometimes their pieces, it's very ammonia, very strong. When you were talking about the ordinance I wrote, now that's being revised, but I was very aggressive with that, and I had it on lots that were 5,000 square feet. So in Norwood, you have smaller lots. Now, if we have, let's say, 10 or 12 in the city on smaller lots, that's probably a good sign, because if you have an allowance for 7 and you're thinking going up to 10, you know, I guess there's kind of peace in the neighborhood because people aren't complaining. So, which is a good thing, but, you know.
Yeah.
When I did ask Mr. Shelby about 7 to 10, he was like, oh, it was, like, that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, I think mine was probably less initially, it was like maybe 5. But at the end of the day, whatever works, like, you know, it's almost like community driven or market driven, like what, you know, if they need 7 and there's no complaints, you know, but to me, it's like, how is the manure disposed? You don't want to have it as a commercial enterprise or home occupation. Now, it's one thing to sell it up to your neighbors, but it's like,
We don't allow that.
yeah, but you know, it's one of those things where
Yeah.
it could be with 7 or 10, well, you know, what are eggs? $3.50, $4 per dozen.
Well, $4.50 to $9. At Kroger at the Woo-Hoo, you can get it for $3.
Yeah.
The Woo-Hoo stickers.
But when our chicken folks came, they were saying that the 7 chickens is about enough to feed their family. So it wasn't like the 7 chickens was giving them hundreds of eggs. It was just supporting their.
And they pointed out when you order, you have to order in even numbers. So it's kind of annoying, because if they order 8 and they all survive, or
Yeah.
10 and they all survive, that to get it back down to 7, you have to go give away the chickens. Assuming they're all hens, because of course they order hens. And then-
Yeah, I think looking at the mathematical, how much does this cost? Look at that first initial inspection. How much does that cost the city? And adding that into the
We could,
fee.
I don't see a fine, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Brady.
no, please, you go ahead.
I would say, I don't see a fine for violations either, which I know it hasn't been an issue yet, but if we want to add it.
I mean, I begin to say, hey, you have a one-time fee. If you get a complaint and we come and we find a violation, you're gonna be fined X amount of money because it's cost us X amount to come and,
I don't think that's a bad idea.
yeah.
So just to, because I mean, first of all, I would hope that if someone's raising chickens and got 10 chickens, that they would give some eggs to their neighbor or something if they have extras. So I would thoroughly support that, having more eggs to feed the neighborhood. Yeah, great. But to the person who acts like that they're paying a little too much, and I get it. Maybe, and this is just a thought, do we have to expect every year? Can we expect every other year? And maybe charge them, say, $35 for every other year?
Yeah. that's what
And
we're-
we'll inspect every other year. I don't know, that's just throwing it out there.
I think one of the things that I've been hearing is that most people who do chickens, because it is such an investment, my sister has done chickens, I've never done chickens, it sounds awful. But they're sweet, but they're, that because it's such an investment, that they tend to take very good care of them. So the need for the annual inspection is sort of like, well, I've got a dog. No one comes and checks if my dog's okay every year, because it's an assumption that I'm taking good care of my dog.
Right.
So I think the idea is to remove the follow-up inspections altogether. Just have the initial permit, and if there's an issue, then they could be.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I don't have any issues there.
But again, I mean, so the questions that I have are, how many permits in Norwood? How long is the initial inspection? I was told about an hour. How long are the follow-up inspections? How many issues or complaints have we had? And then fee for violations, and what?
If we know the
That would
cost
be-
of the inspection, I feel like we can figure out a fee from there too.
Okay,
Or if Mr. Shelby has an idea too, for that'd be fine.
okay.
I mean, I'm with Mr. Skelly, he made some good points. 25 a year is almost like we're subsidizing, that's a great point. Like, that's nothing. But like, if you're spending $300 in, what is that, 8 years?
Yeah. And I mean, they said they'd be fine paying
A bigger,
a
yeah,
chunk of money up
upfront.
front and.
not
that's
worrying
what
about it.
is.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I think that saves the city money and. makes
one of
it
my
more
goals to have a little farm, that'd be nice,
Same.
I'm actively working on that, so.
Here
piece
in
of
Norwood?
land. I would love to have some chickens and
Yeah.
horse,
I don't know that that's.
some land. Not in Norwood.
So we'll have to
talking
check the
about it.
code for
We will
that
check
one.
the code for that. Any other questions you guys want me to find out? How many permits, how long total initial inspection, follow-up inspection, issues, complaints?
Yeah,
Fees.
I would say if there is any bearing on violations that they know of, if we should have like different amounts of fees for that. Like if it's something small. I don't know the specific violations, like if you buried your dead chicken in the yard versus your manure is building up. I assume those are two different varying degrees of
Don't you eat
violation.
them?
I mean, I would, but you can't.
Don't you
kill 'em.
eat
You
them?
can't slaughter.
You can't slaughter
That would be
here.
slaughtering
You don't
with
bury
Brady.
them, right? You eat them, right?
Well, that's, Yeah. but you
Let's
can't
be honest.
slaughter or do they- But, you know.
That would be against
I'm
the
assuming
code.
there's different varying
What,
degrees
eat
of
them?
violations.
No person
And
shall
should there be
slaughter
different
any chicken upon a residential
varying
lot.
amounts of fees to that, or do we want to do like a one-time,
What's the point of having them?
solve the problem in
I didn't know.
X amount of time?
I think there are local
I don't
butchers you
think we
would
want
take them
chickens
to.
being slaughtered.
You know what I
on the
mean?
side.
Yeah.
Depending on the severity of the violation, and if they haven't, you know, you have X, what's the time frame that they have to fix the violation,
I think we should add, yeah,
and like that,
a recourse for violations.
but I don't know what that looks like, so.
I
Because
think
we-
we could say they have 14 or 30 days. I feel like those are normal amounts of times.
Yeah.
to-
We don't have anything currently about that, correct?
Yeah.
Maybe
just
we haven't
something-
needed it.
We haven't, so that's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
But maybe just for when it finally happens, if it should ever happen. Mr. Skelly, do you think if someone challenged, because it says here the health department can revoke the permit, would that go to like, how do you appeal something that the health department takes away? Sorry, this is my administrative law hat on now. I'm curious about the appeals process.
Is it internalized within the public health department? or
I know, I
is it
don't know.
sent
Is there an administrative board within the health department?
They do have a board.
They have a board, the Board of Health.
Well, the board, and the mayor's on the board.
Do they have administrative hearings, like the planning
to-
commission?
So if it's an
They have-
administrative action, someone
It would be,
appealing the decision,
they'd get a hearing.
you think so? So it's-
We might want to, we might want to figure that out, just in case.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's, you would hope not to have more, let's say, worst case scenario once
I've
a
never
year.
had an administrative appeal at my other job involving
Yeah.
animal permits, so I am curious now. Or agriculture permits.
All right, well, you're going to figure out the legal piece. I'll get the answers to my questions. Anything else we need to talk about chickens
I guess just put them on the agenda for the next
for
meeting.
the next meeting? Do we want to schedule that now for January?
That'd be good.
Can I add another thing to the agenda?
Of course you can.
Let me give you the I would like to add that, I don't know how you want to word it. So it's involving the nuisance ordinance, but not like our specific ordinance, but the idea that we've talked about previously, which it might just still be on our list, of out-of-state landlords. and
Ooh.
Getting,
I-
yeah, and so I'd like to,
We can chat about that when we're
okay.
not this group.
But getting a representative, that, I want to bring that discussion back, because just talking to administrative, like, the nuisance ordinance is not being monitored. So currently, we can't enforce it. And so I want to continue that discussion of what we think would be the next step to try and help with those properties within the
Yes.
city. So however
Did you
want
catch
to-
that, sir? Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
No, I gotcha. Dumb question. Isn't the nuisance in law?
It is.
But we took it out of
It took
committee
it
and
out.
got
I mean,
it
it's been
approved,
and all
so
that. Like, we passed
Okay.
the council.
procedurally, I think it could come here. No.
Yeah.
Or it should be.
I don't know if we want to bring that back, I'm not saying that. We need to.
Yeah, we need to.
We need
I just
to.
don't, do you
So-
want to, I'm on both, I don't care.
I mean, that'll be next year, so maybe when we
Oh,
get,
yeah, actually, should we
we'll have new committees, so.
plan a meeting for the next?
so don't
Should we
have
wait
to-
until new committees are arranged?
Yeah, we should wait, okay. But I need to
We'll
write
put it
that
on the
down.
agenda for, make sure you mention it in your new business for first of the year.
Okay. All right, where am I going to write that down then? I'll put it here. I really need. Okay, so for the next housing meeting, this is just the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about chickens and nuisance. Anything else?
Well, landlord registration or tenant
Yeah.
registration.
Landlord.
Yeah,
Tenant registration.
specifically just for landlords, or
Nuisance
not,
purposes.
not
Yeah.
close.
Anything else we need to talk about the next housing agenda?
That's all I have.
No? All right, I think we are good to finish then. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are adjourned.